Good evening. It is 5:30, so we will begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we will move into introductions, and we will start with Mr. Ott.
Griffin Ott.
Jessica Bigley.
Kennedy Bowman.
Greg Eating.
Rachel Wade.
Jason Beckrow.
Bill Scolao.
Scott Allen.
Lori Koenig.
Thank you. We have approval of the agenda for this evening's meeting. Board members, you've had a chance to look at that. I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then moving on to approval of the consent action items, and tonight that includes the minutes from our March 10th meeting and the financial statement and bills that were reviewed by the Finance Committee. So any questions? If not, I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
A roll call.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, all right.
Keeping me honest. Roll call vote. Mrs. Von Koenig. Sorry, right as you're drinking.
Aye.
Mr. Allen.
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta.
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow.
Aye.
Mrs. Bigley.
Aye.
Mr. Ott.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you, Bill. Now, moving on to good news about our schools. What do we have tonight?
Yeah, first we're going to recognize the 6 wrestlers who competed in the state finals. I think I saw Mr. Quinn back there. Why don't you take the podium? You can get started with that.
Come on, guys, we don't have to weigh in tonight. It's after the season.
How are you doing? Sorry, I got to catch my breath. I was working the middle school track meet, long jump. So if you know where that's into relation, here. Mr. Scaletta, good to see you, too. You like the new beeper?
Yeah, I do like the new beeper.
It's
I'm
nice,
just
isn't
getting
it?
used to it, so.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for giving us this opportunity to, highlight some of these phenomenal student athletes. I always like to advocate for our sport. Wrestling is such a demanding sport, physically, mentally, and this group of athletes dedicate a lot of time, a ton of time, whether it be weight management, practices, competition, saying no to a lot of things too that their peers don't. And so I always like to come. I think this is year 3 for me as the head coach, bringing our state placers here and representing our fine wrestling program. One highlight too, we have a couple highlights. 2 academic All-Americans, National Wrestling Collegiate Association academic All-Americans. And then we also have our school's first ever female state placer. We had a female wrestling team this year. We had a state champion, Pilot Swab.
All right. Hey.
And we have Joel Nkoyo, who took 6th, and Vernon Riggins, who finishes off his career at 7th place. So we just want to thank you guys for this time and allowing us to continue to be a high-level program for our community.
All right, nice job, everybody.
Congratulations. When do you guys actually start? Because you're doing running and everything way ahead of tournaments, right? Is this a year-round deal?
I think once you start, you never stop.
Yeah.
So we do take some time off after the state tournament, gave them a couple of weeks. A lot of them are involved in our freestyle and Greco club. So they started a week, spring break week, because they are training for an international tournament in Wisconsin this weekend, the Aviators. Mm-hmm. We actually had 2 years now, we've had foreign national teams come and train with us here at Lakeshore. We've had a group from Germany last year, and this year we had Finland, Switzerland, and Lithuania. So they currently are in Wisconsin to go to that tournament as well. So we got some nice little relationships we got building with that, and so being able to expand our techniques on the international stage has been phenomenal to showcase as well. So.
Great example of setting goals, making sacrifices, and well done. Thanks, guys. Thanks to everybody for coming.
Yeah, well done.
Any other questions? Anything any of you would like to share with us? They're like, nope, we're just going to stand back here. That's fine, too. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Well done. And we have two good newses this month. The second is we're going to hear from some middle school students who have shared highlights of their trip to Washington, D.C.
So I'm super excited to introduce the 8th graders tonight to talk about our Washington, D.C. trip. We spent 4 amazing days in D.C. last month, and we learned a ton. My favorite part is always getting the kids out of their element and watching truly how mature and awesome our kids are in this setting that's out of state. They're away from their parents. Some of them, this is their first time ever being away from their parents overnight. And it's just such a trip of growth personally, but then also growth academically, because we really, really cram a lot into 4 days, which is what the kids are going to talk about. So, day 1.
Hello, I'm Kellen Blasco.
I'm Knox Martin. We started off the day with a 5:30 a.m. report time in the cafeteria at the middle school, but the buses were a little late, so we were able to mess around in the gym and have a little fun before the buses arrived.
When the buses arrived, we had a 11-hour bus ride to the Flight 93 Memorial in Pennsylvania. The Flight 93 Memorial is where a plane that was part of 9/11 was. It was going to Washington, D.C., but the members on the plane, they took over the plane and they crashed it in a field.
The Flight 93 Memorial was very powerful because you were able to walk around the site and see where the actual plane crashed, and you were able to listen to some of the calls that the passengers made on the plane to home and to their family and friends, just saying that they love them, and it was kind of like their last moment.
Nice job, guys.
I'm Hayden Vree.
And I'm Nicole Cadio.
We started day 2 off going to Jefferson, FDR, and MLK Junior Memorials.
Then we went to Ford's Theater.
Then we went to the National Archives.
We went to the Museum of American History next.
Then we went to the Museum of Natural History.
The National Museum of African American History and Culture
Then
as
the
well.
Pentagon Memorial.
Lincoln, Vietnam War, and Korean War memorials.
The total of the day, we took 24,848 steps.
That's a big day.
We crammed in a lot in that day, and we saw a lot of cool memorials and a lot of history, and learned about a lot that day.
Yeah. One thing that was like really powerful to me was like how everything was like so nicely thought out. Like everything had like so much detail, like so much thought put into it. Like for example, the Pentagon Memorial in the top left corner, it have like the tracks and like the direction of the benches all have like meaning to them.
Oh, very cool.
I'm Bruno Sanchez,
I'm Sarah Emerson.
and we're going to be talking about day 3 of Washington. First, we visited the Capitol Visitor Center,
Then we went to the Library of Congress.
and then we visited the Holocaust Museum,
Then the Arlington National Cemetery.
and then we went to the changing of the guard and the wreath of ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier,
Then we went to World War II Memorial.
and then we went to the Washington Monument,
We ended the day with dinner and bowling.
and that day we took about 20,784 steps.
Amazing.
My favorite part about that day was probably the Holocaust Museum because we got to talk to like a survivor from it, and after learning about it in school, it really opened my eyes about the situation.
My favorite part about day 3 was probably the Arlington Cemetery and how big it was and how many graves there are, and watching the changing of the guard ceremony.
silent because it's the changing of the guard, but it's also nice to like hear the commands.
21 steps. We'll see.
It's okay. It's okay.
Oh, there we go.
Hurry, son! Follow!
So those were 4 Lakeshore Middle School students who were chosen to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier via an essay contest. So super big honor. And then the girls shared their highlights from day 3, so we'll move into day 4.
Hi, my name is Peyton St. Hilaire.
We started off at the U.S. Marine Corps in Iwo Jima.
Then we went to the Air and Space Museum,
We took a 11-hour bus ride back home.
and we arrived at LMS at 10 p.m. My favorite thing about the Air and Space Museum was probably being able to see the comparison of the plane size to a human, because I feel like when you go to airports, you don't really get that comparison. And it was just really cool to see how they were all built differently, and yeah.
And we got to see real life planes and a real life space shuttle.
Is that the museum out by Dulles Airport?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I've been to the one downtown. I've never made it out there.
Yeah, super cool.
Awesome.
And then there's a separate tower that you can go up, and you can, just like kind of watch planes come in and out too. At Dulles, so super cool.
Yep.
So I can't finish this presentation without really acknowledging the adults that made it happen. So Mr. Graziano, who teaches 8th grade social studies, he's the one that coordinates everything with the company that we go through. So it's a ton of logistics on his part to make this happen for 70 8th graders and 70 8th graders' families. Special shout out to Mr. Smith, Ms. Ettinger, Ms. Blasco, Ms. Veldman, and Mr. Churchill. They are teachers on staff who also help chaperone, and it's not possible without them helping. And every year it's such an awesome experience. I cry on every trip because it's so emotional in so many ways. But it's also too just emotional, like the support we have from staff who there's never a question about going because we want to make sure that our kids continually have this experience. So we really appreciate your continued support in granting this trip every year and approving it every year because it really is such an amazing experience for the kids, an amazing experience for the adults, and just so much learning in that amount of time. Obviously, you saw how busy the days were, so they're packed. It's not a vacation. Mr. Graz likes to remind families at the parent meeting, it's not a vacation. You are busy. You will be exhausted when you come home, but it's like the best kind of exhausted. So thank you so much.
Now to the students, for the 7th graders and their parents who are thinking about whether or not they want to participate in this trip next year. If a 7th grader came up to you and said, "Should I go on the trip?" what would you tell them and why?
I would definitely say yes. There's a lot of learning, and it's really cool just to see everything there. And you also build a lot of relationships with some friends that you wouldn't normally hang out with outside of school. So I think it's also cool on that part too.
I would definitely say yes as well because you learn about all these monuments in history class and you see a bunch of pictures and just learn about them a lot. And it's really cool to see them actually in person.
Awesome.
Anybody else? You had your hand up. You were going to say something.
Sorry. Yeah, I kind of agree with what they both said. Yeah, it's kind of hard, but it's like really nice to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And for the parents who are nervous about letting their kids go, what would you tell the parents?
I would say they're all gonna be okay because you have the best teachers and best principal looking after us, and everything's all planned out. All of your meals, food, everything's all good.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I didn't pay him for that.
Any other questions, board members?
I'm curious, does a trip like this kind of like whet your appetite to do more trips like this or maybe go back to Washington someday?
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Keep exploring. That's fantastic.
Was there any place that you went that you were surprised by how moving it was?
I personally would definitely say the Holocaust Museum.
Mhm.
I mean, you learn a lot about it, but just to go there in person and to see all the things that pictures and stories and stuff like that is just it's really hard, I'd say.
Was there one specific exhibit that really touched you?
There was one spot in there was like a big room full of shoes from all of the Holocaust members, and yeah, that was a hard room, one of the harder ones.
Did you get to follow a family in the Holocaust Museum? Because when I was there, you get a little folder and you followed the family through the museum.
There was not a family, but at the end they gave you there was a little card you could pick up, and it was of one of the Holocaust people, and it was their story of what they went through. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for being here this evening. You guys did a great job.
Thanks for the presentation.
Okay, moving on to our superintendent informational report.
Yeah, so being a middle school principal myself for 12 years, I took 5 different groups to that same trip, and just the pictures kind of brought me back a little bit. And the room with the shoes, it's the smell.
Yeah.
It's the smell of that room is something else. So, this all seems to be a little bit less important now, right? So that's what's funny. We have entered the after spring break time that includes a lot of standardized testing. Students in 3rd through 8th grade have started M-STEP testing, which will go on for a few weeks, and the middle and high school will have PSAT and SAT testing over that same time frame. These tests are stressful for students and staff and include a change in daily schedules and routines. Of course, we work hard for our students to have the knowledge, skills, and environments to achieve their best results. We take that very seriously. This time of year also includes enrollment for the upcoming school year. We have meetings scheduled for at each elementary for families who have a 4 or 5-year-old interested in attending kindergarten or young fives next year. These meetings will be held on April 23rd at both 6 p.m. it should say, and 6:45 p.m. I don't know why it says 8 a.m., but 6 p.m. and 6:45 p.m. at each of the elementary schools. We have posted all of this information on our website and through our social media platforms, and I know those are all the right times, so I've looked at those. And starting on April 23rd, same date, our Schools of Choice window opens. From April 23rd through May 18th, families who do not live in a Lakeshore boundary can apply to be a Lakeshore student. We have openings at each grade level and provide acceptance letters to those families after the May 18th deadline. For more information, families should read through the enrollment section on our district website. And finally, this is definitely an exciting time of year for our district. Spring sports, as Bill Scaletta can attest to, are in full session. Our robotics team is headed to the World Championships, and our performing arts are all gearing up for their spring performances. And before we know it, we're going to have graduation. I think it's only like a month away, almost. So we're about there. So that's this month's report.
Thank you. Now the report from our student representative, Kennedy.
This past month, I met with a group of 5th graders who attend Roosevelt Elementary School. We discussed possible concerns and/or ideas that they may have had to bring to the board and the building administrator. Items that were talked about include adding more lunch options, getting parts of the bathroom fixed, the school day schedule, and the timing of classes. The board and building administrators will receive a full handout of these items. I'm going to be reaching out to the student leadership group this upcoming month to discuss any concerns or ideas they may have.
Yeah, so that handout, I wanted to make sure went to Ms. Kinzo before it would go out to the rest of the board, just to make sure, like, was a heads up on some of those things. But that will be going out to you in my next board notes on next week Sunday. So.
Thank you. Next is a student enrollment update from Tracy.
Actually, I put the budget modification and the student enrollment together, if that's all right to do now, or if you want them separated. Just based on how I sent the slides over.
I think that's okay. And any objection to that?
No, we can do that.
It goes hand in hand anyways.
Yeah. I just got to make sure I do the roll call vote for the budget modification, or Bill will call me out again.
Okay, first we'd like to do budget modification number 3. So it's been a little bit since we met and discussed budget modifications, as we missed budget modification 2 due to computer issues. So I just want to kind of do a recap of where we were and where we have landed in number 3. First, we started out with the original budget. We used what we believed would be a good budgeting start for projected revenues in using the governor's recommended foundation allowance. We also had about 2640 FTE as a student count, no excess equity from Berry and RISA, which we have typically done every year, no changes in the MIPSERS rates, again, based on the recommendations, and minimum ESSER funding as we were starting to wrap everything up with the deadline rapidly approaching. And then we went to budget modification number 1, which we found that we did not get the governor's recommended foundation allowance. We didn't have a foundation allowance increase. Instead, we had a MIPSERS decrease for 1 year. We also lost various categoricals, including Section 31AA, which is a mental health type categorical. We lost that, as well as I mentioned, some other categoricals, including a CTE elimination of a 61C grant, which funds equipment. We also had a decrease in federal funding in terms of the spend, as we did use all of our ESSER funding before 6/30, before the year end. Then again, budget modification 2 did not happen. So as we move into budget modification number 3, our changes are taxable revenue. We had a small decrease in that. We had some more MIPSers categorical decreases based on our demographics and how they pay us. We have some deferral usage. We've deferred revenue for a couple of years as we were using that Corona money. Now we're going to be starting to use some of that deferral that we've saved over the past few years. We did receive money from Barry and Risa for excess equity, and we had federal carryover. So our carryover from the prior year for our title grants were brought into the budget modification. That change from the original budget to budget modification number 3 was a decrease in about $183,000. So that was about the decrease in projected revenue. Now, projected expenditures, we started our projected expenditures in the original budget by having a step or step equivalent increase. We kept MIPSers the same, that's our retirement percentages. Some funds or some expenditures that were funded previously by ESSER, we eliminated, and we did have a bus purchase that we did also. Moving into budget modification number 1, we make changes every year once we have everyone set. So we had hiring changes, which changed the demographics of salaries and benefits. We had a decrease, again, in the CTE capital outlay. As we mentioned, revenue categorical was eliminated, so we decreased that amount also in our budget for expenditures. We also expanded longevity to recognize staff who've missed steps and have remained with the district. So we added a group, maybe 5-6 years, again, to try to recognize staff that have been here and have lost steps. And in addition, we also increased our FTE in the areas of speech and special education, again, due to student needs. As we move into budget modification number 3 for expenditures, there was, again, as we mentioned in revenue, a MIPSers categorical decrease. We hired 3 behavioral support specialists, 1 at each elementary. We're using some of that at-risk deferral that I mentioned in revenue for the middle school for some SEL and trails time that's done 4 days a week for, I believe, about 15 minutes a day. We used federal carryover, and we had some in my department. Our payroll, as I call her, goddess, Nancy Von Koenig retired, and she mentored our new payroll person, Amy. So there was an increase in that. Also, we had 147G. This is a 3% that we've discussed in the past. What they'd never mentioned with the state is that the district would be on the hook for some expenses, including FICA and some retirement expenses. So again, another unknown. So that takes our fund balance from where we originally budgeted from about 14.61 to 12.77%. Again, we're still within where the board would like us to be, and it is very important to keep that fund balance percentage higher, 1, so we don't have to borrow, and 2, for things such as these 147G payments that the district never budgeted for. We did not realize that we would have to spend fund balance for this categorical. So those are some reasons to keep that fund balance a little higher. When we get around 10%, we have to budget, or have to borrow, I apologize. So 12.77, again, gives us some flexibility, especially with increases in utility costs and some various other things, deductibles that we had to meet due to some claims that we've had. So again, little things that do add up.
Tracy, can I ask a couple questions for helping with clarity? So when the budget came together last year, a year ago right now, or a couple months from now, we all were told it was going to be a certain increase in foundation, and that never happened. And then they gave it in terms of, instead of employees having to pay in the 3% for health insurance costs, the employees no longer, or continue to pay it in, but then they gave us that money back in order to reimburse them
Correct.
for this year. So I think what we have to all realize is that reimbursement back to them, even though it's a money flow through for us, we're then on the hook for the ORS and the FICA payment for that. That's why it ends up being our cost extra, because it becomes a payroll tax cost. That's something to realize. That's kind of, want to make sure that that was caught. So that was an unexpected expense that we had to take on because of that. And then starting in, I believe it's October of
October
this
1st.
current year, then that expense won't be there anymore for us because the 3% will just no longer be paid by the employee. However, we are pretty sure that the state's going to shift that 3% or part of that 3% cost onto the actual district rather than the employee. We're pretty sure that that's going to happen. Not sure the entire 3%, but at least a portion of that's going to come back, not on the employee's shoulder, but on the district shoulder out of that. So just more of a FYI that's coming up. Am I misspeaking?
No.
I think I hit it good.
No, right now what it has in the governor's proposed budget is, again, as Greg mentioned, the 3%. The bulk of it will be borne by the district, and we'll get about half of it back, but it is a one-time payment. They were very specific. It is a one-time assistance in paying that percentage back into the ORS system. So again, it's very good for staff, but for the district, it is not in the long run.
There have been so many changes at the state level from when the budget first had to be put together and approved till now, and just you and your team have done a fabulous job of keeping up with all of that and understanding the ramifications for both our employees and our staff, and frankly our students, and just understanding how to manage through all of that. And I just want to acknowledge that, because I know that this year has been much more tumultuous than years in the past. So thank you for your diligence in managing through that.
Thank you for recognizing it. It's definitely been a very interesting year in terms of state funding. There's a supplemental that we're supposed to get some more 31AA money, because initially it was a sixth of what we received last year. We're supposed to get up to half of it now in our next state aid update. Again, it's changing very quickly. So thank you, appreciate that. Any other questions on budget modification number 3?
So that 3% that you're talking about that would be on the shoulders of the district, that one-time payment next year is to help get through next year, but then after that, that would still be 3% every year on the district, correct?
So we'll be getting, again, based on the governor's budget, we'll be getting half of it reimbursed through the state, but then in the future, yes, it would be borne by the district.
Any other questions? And if not, I would accept a motion to approve budget modification number 3.
So moved.
And this is a roll call vote. So Mr. Ott?
Aye.
Mrs. Bigley?
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow?
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Okay, now we'll go into enrollment projections. This first graph, one we've had in the past, basically shows our historical trend of our student count and our professional count for the past 10 years. Our student count was 2633 for this current school year, which was approximately 36 down from last year. This decrease follows the majority of K-12 schools in the state of Michigan. Read a couple of articles in the past few weeks, Cranes, Forbes, again, talking about 80% of Michigan, traditional Michigan K-12 schools are experiencing the same amount of decrease. Obviously, some of the things that have been discussed, as we've discussed here, are birth rates. That's one that's majorly affecting our student count, as well as out-migration. Another thing that is creeping up is the rise in homeschool and private schools. We don't feel hear the effect as much on the private schools, homeschools. It's very difficult to get our hands around how many children are out with homeschools. But again, we are experiencing the same trend as most, around 80% of the districts in the state of Michigan. Our professional staff has increased over the past few years. It's important to realize why. Some of this has been facilitated by grants. Again, that 31AA grant I mentioned, that was specific to hiring staff. So again, we've received grants for staff hires. In addition, is to support the needs of our students. When we have higher caseloads in speech and special ed, we have to meet federal compliance requirements and to meet their needs. So again, to see that our staff count has increased, it's not just to increase, it's because we've had grants and we're meeting those needs, student needs. We've also seen that same rate of increase in our support staff. Again, as I mentioned in our budget modification, the 3 behavior specialists at the elementary level. These are important hires to support our teaching staff. So when we do look at that trend, we do want to realize why we've had those increases. Looking at our district-wide projections in the future, we've used Sanford consultants. We've been using them for over 20 years, where one thing to notice, or I'm sorry, to mention, is that historically we've been pretty close, or we have beaten what Sanford has stated. That group is fairly conservative in their projections. So when we look at the graph, we actually use the blended. So the green line is typically what we budget, and we also factor in our own internal projections. Dawn and I go through enrollments probably once a week here, especially in the next coming weeks, to say where are we at in terms of where Dr. Fred and Sanford says we are. So we look at both this as well as internal, and we have been better than Sanford in the past few years, which is very important as we see this decline. And we've had the same graph pretty much since I've been here. What's important with this in relation to what we've seen is that we continue to watch both where are we at in enrollment projections and where are our staffing needs to support our teaching staff, as our primary revenue is student count. So it's very important to watch all of this as we move into the budget, both where are we at in terms of student enrollment and where we're at in terms of our teaching staff. So looking at this again, we do see that decrease in student enrollment, but again, that is very typical of what we see across the state of Michigan. And if we have any questions.
We just need a few blizzards to get our birth rate back up.
Blizzards, subdivisions, all of that would be very helpful.
Any other questions?
Lights out.
I read through some of the same articles that Tracy was talking about. One of the numbers that came and jumped out at me was about 20 years ago, there were around 2 million students in the state of Michigan. And recently, the most recent count was around 1.5 million students in the state of Michigan. That's a pretty significant difference in terms of overall population in the state. And yet, county-wise, our county grew in population over the last year, but lowered in the number of students that are around. So it's kind of an interesting birth rate, just lower numbers of kids that people are having.
We need more kids.
Any more questions? Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks,
Thank
Tracy.
you.
Moving on to Board of Education reports. The first up is the Community Connections Committee. Mrs. Bigley, could you read that report, please?
Yes, I can. The Community Connections Committee met on Tuesday, April 8th. Present at the meeting were Scott Allen, Rachel Wade, Susan Toothman, Greg Eating, and myself. The committee continued reviewing the plan for the Showcase 2025 event that will be held on April 28th at the middle school. Susan also reviewed social media stats from the past month and the upcoming Wellness Challenge taking place with staff in the last quarter of the school year.
Thank you. The Finance and Facilities Committee report, Mr. Ott, could you please share that?
On Tuesday, April the 8th, the Facilities and Finance Committee met, consisting of Rachel Wade, Lori Von Koenig, Greg Eating, Tracy Althouse, and myself. Item discussed, but not limited to, include the following. Tracy discussed the monthly financials, which included the district's investments for all funds, cash received, and checks written during the month, and balances of trust accounts. She also presented the year-to-date sinking fund expenditures and bond expenditures. The committee discussed the amount of excess equity received over the past 10 years from Barry and Risa. It was noted that while the last 2 years have been higher than previous years, the amount is not known until after Risa's yearly audit, and that fluctuates greatly from year to year. Tracy presented April's budget modification, which we just discussed at the board meeting. Various conversations were had, including preliminary enrollment projections and state aid revenue projections based on the governor's proposal. And Greg also discussed upcoming contract management committee negotiations.
Thank you. The Student Success Committee, Dr. Beckrow, could you share that report, please?
Yes. Student Success Committee met on Tuesday, March 25th. Present in the meeting were Bill Scaletta, Jessica Bigley, Jaron Blood, Natalie Maserata, Greg Eating, and myself. The committee discussed student behavior at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. Mr. Blood explained the implementation of each building's PBIS and behavior system and the progress of the buildings who are further along in their implementation. Ms. Maserata discussed the English language learner programming in the district and how it has evolved in the last few years.
Thank you. All right. Go past budget modification. Recommendations of the superintendent, a vehicle conditional bid for a 10-passenger van.
Yes, at the recommendation of Operations Manager Nick White, we recommend issuing a conditional bid with the intent of purchasing a 10-passenger van not to exceed $39,000. General funds will be used for this purchase.
Board members, any questions or discussion? If not, I would accept a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
And this is a roll call vote, so Mr. Ott?
Aye.
Mrs. Bigley?
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow?
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Public comment time, did we have anyone sign up? All right. So moving on to adjourn the board meeting. I would accept a motion to do so.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody.